Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining in. We'll be starting the session on time. In the meantime, if you've got any questions, please feel free to let me know in the comment section and please introduce yourself. Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining in on this live session. So, folks, I can see the learners are still joining in. So, welcome to this live session from Manifold AI Learning. Now, in this session, we will learn how we can build our own generative AI application from scratch. So, I'll take you through some of the practical tools that you can use in order to start coding and build your AI application from scratch. It is very simple. We can make use of the OpenAI API and integrate it with our requirement, and I'll show you some of the tips as well as how you can implement the complete CI/CD pipeline for this generative AI application too. So that would be the overall agenda that we'll be covering. So it's more of a hands-on. I'll do my best to ensure that everyone will be able to follow along. Now, if something is still not clear, please don't hesitate to ask the question, guys. Make use of the comment section and don't hesitate to ask any of the question that you might have. Okay, so thank you again, guys. So before we get started, I want to know from each of you. So what's your experience and your understanding about working with generative AI and building the application? So please let me know your uh, experience, and please let me know your familiarity in building the generative AI application. Okay, so I see from Salman. Salman says that I am new to the generative AI, but I've been coding in Python. I've created some application. Okay, that's great, Salman. That's a good place to start, I would say. And how about others? What's your experience in generative AI and building the application? So Aniket says, I've tried with Streamlit. Okay, that's an interesting one. And I can see a response from Behra. Behra says that Satyabrata Behra says that I've got more than 7 years of experience and also have a knowledge on generative AI, but haven't built. Okay, oh, that's great, Satyabrata. Thank you so much for sharing. And I see a response from Akshay. Akshay is also a beginner, haven't built any application, but is interested to it. Okay, thank you, Akshay. Okay, that's great, guys. So we've got the learners from various level. I see few more learners are also messaging over here in the comment. So like most of the learners that I see here are beginners. Okay, that's completely fine, guys. Okay, that's completely fine. Okay, so Satyabrata says us in which cloud platform will you be deploying the application? So I'll be making use of Google Kubernetes engine. So the same code can be used in even in the AWS too. Even including if you have got your own private cloud, the same thing can be used over there. The deployment aspect that I'll be showing you is the Kubernetes one because Kubernetes is the one which is a cloud agnostic. So that's the one that will be building it. And for the CI/CD, I'll make use of GitHub Action. That's a easy way to get started without paying any cloud cost. So we can make use of the GitHub Action and we can deploy it on our Google Kubernetes. That's what I'll be doing it. But yeah, instead of Google Kubernetes, maybe you can plug in the code for AWS. You can extend it over there too. Okay, so I think, yeah, we can. So team, please confirm if we can start our today's session. Please confirm by typing as good to start in the chat window as a confirmation so that we can get started with today's agenda. Now, before we get started, if you have got any questions or anything as such, let me know if it's a quick query, I can answer that, or else I can definitely take it up at the end of the session. Okay, thank you, Blessy. Uh, thank you, Akshay. Thank you, Samyukta. Thank you, Sridhar. Okay, thank you, Samiksha. Okay, excellent, guys. Thank you so much, team, for your confirmation. So let's proceed ahead and let's see how we can build the generative AI application from scratch. So first of all, when we think about the generative AI, so I'll just give a quick idea about what exactly is generative AI. Generative AI is an artificial intelligence or a type of machine learning, you can say, where the system is capable of generating the new content or generating the data based on the data it has been trained upon. That's what the generative AI is. Now, in order to interact with this generative AI, let's pick up one of the example. I'll just pick up the ChatGPT, the same generative AI platform that I'll be using it for today's session. Let's pick up that as an example. So ChatGPT is a generative AI application. We are going to send in the input, and this input, we call it as a prompt. So if I send in any input for this ChatGPT, for example, what is the uh, uh, like code for, let's say, printing output in Python. Suppose this is my input. Now this input, we call it as the prompt. So we generally send in the input to the generative AI as a prompt, and the generative AI is going to process this prompt, and it is going to generate the content based on the training data it has been trained upon. That's the general idea about this generative AI. Now, if you are thinking about building an application, we have to ensure that we should be able to get the input from the user. Now this input will be a prompt, so we should be able to get the input from the user, and this input should be reachable to this generative AI that we have got. Maybe I can, since we are talking about OpenAI, I should be able to send this input to this OpenAI API, and I should be able to process this input. And once the input is processed by this OpenAI server, we should be able to generate the output. Now, that's the general expectation of building an generative AI based application. Now, there are various variants around it. Now, whenever I'm sending the data to this OpenAI API, this OpenAI API large language model that we have got over there, it can refer to the existing file database. That means I can connect a file over here wherein I can ask a question based on the file and I can get the output based on that file that I've got. So that is an extension of the current knowledge that I've got in this model that I have got. Okay, that's one variant. Or the other advanced variant that we see these days is we'll connect it to an external server, which can be called as a vector database. Okay, where we can store everything in this vector database, and instead of simply referring to a simple file, we'll have a complex data present in this vector database, and using the knowledge from this vector database, we can generate the response. Or the other approach is, whatever the model that I've got, I can perform the fine tuning, where I'll go ahead and use my business data and tune the base model itself to my business data set, so that we can generate the response from this OpenAI, that, like, whatever, since we are talking about API, we can generate the response from this OpenAI, which is suitable for the given data set. So these are the various approaches at a very high level that we can build, and we can complicate the system as much as possible. I mean, depending on our use case and depending on the maturity that we have got in the organization. Now, for today's session, we'll build a system where we will uh, create an like API. I'll make use of a Python library called Fast API, and using that, we'll be able to like get the request from the users, and that is going to send the input, whatever the input that I would get from the user, to this OpenAI API, and the model is going to generate the response. So that's the kind of application that I'm going to build. I can also link, maybe we'll also link the file as well in this OpenAI platform, so that whenever we ask any input on based on the file, we'll get the output based on the contents of the file. So that's the kind of application that we are going to build. So in order to build this application, first thing is we have to get familiar with this OpenAI APIs that I have got. So let's have a quick look into the OpenAI APIs, so that we can easily get started. I'm going to say platform.openai.com. So this is the website where you can access the OpenAI platform. Now, this OpenAI platform is going through a lot of changes. Like, I would say that in 1 month back, we didn't had an option of generate specifying the project. Now we can set the project and the organization ID and everything. So it keeps on changing. So I would highly recommend you to check out visit these pages often, so that you stay updated on the changes that is happening in this OpenAI platform. Now, as I mentioned, we are going to work with this APIs of this OpenAI. In order to work with the APIs of this OpenAI, one prerequisite is you need to have your account set up, and that account should have a credit balance. So if you go to the organization settings, of your OpenAI platform, if you go to the billing tab, so you should be having a some credit balance should be available. Without that, you'll not be able to call the API. That means can like practically call it, you'll not be able to generate the response. So that is something that you have to remember. A minimum credit balance of like when you're doing the recharge, minimum recharge of $5 is required. Okay, you can just recharge it once and you can utilize it as and when you use it, the credit balance will get reduced. Okay, that's a preliminary step that you have to do in order to be able to call this API. And to interact with this OpenAI API, we also have the other frameworks too. There are frameworks such as LangChain. But for today's session, we'll keep it simple. We'll make use of the APIs from the OpenAI itself. Okay, we'll make use of our pure Python programming language and we will interact with this API. So I'll click on this API reference. And over here, we can get to know about how we can make use of the various APIs. Now, before I describe about this API, since we are talking in depth, let me just give you a background about what are the functionalities that are available inside this OpenAI platform. So inside this OpenAI platform, we have got various functionalities, but the two most commonly used ones are chat and the assistant. So these are the two most commonly used uh, capability that we have got in this OpenAI platform. Now, when we talk about the chat, so chat is basically I'll provide a list of information or list of messages. I'm going to generate the response. Okay, it's like one-to-one scenario. I'll provide an input. I'll get a response from the uh, chat GPT or this large language model that we have got. So that's the usage of this chat API. And we have the assistants API. Now, this is the assistants API. Now, what it does is here inside this assistant API, let me just take you to this page itself. So here you can build the assistants which can call the models and you can also make use of the tools to perform the task. So here with this assistant AI or API that we have got, so what we can do is we can build our own AI assistants. That means we can build our own AI assistants within our own application. Now, this is something which is suitable for our today's requirement, where we want to build our own AI application, which is an AI assistant within my own application. The best part about this assistant is it has got the instruction. It can leverage the models, tools, and files in order to respond to the user queries. So as I mentioned at the start, we'll build an assistant which will make use of the file that I've got. And when I send in any input, it should be able to use that file that we have created and generate the response, isn't it? So that's what this assistance API is for. Like it looks promising for our task that we are talking about. And they have given some information as how we can get started when it comes to creation of this assistant. So they have given some code as well. How do we mention the code and how do we mention the input when we are creating with the assistant? Okay, now that we have a foundation idea about this assistants API, so let's come back and let's get a hands-on feel as how we can create such assistant API. Now, in this case, we are going to build our own assistant. The best thing about our OpenAI platform is I can interact with this OpenAI platform with the help of graphical user interface that is using this playground option that we have got, or I can also make use of a programmatic way, just like they have described in this documentation page. So it's much simpler to understand when we make use of this graphical user interface approach. So let's go ahead and make use of this approach. So here inside this playground, I'm going to create a new assistant. I'll say create assistant, and this is going to ask me to specify a name. I'll mention as build AI application crash. Okay, that's the name that I'm going to specify. And this is the name for our reference. Okay, but in the backend, this assistant will be actually like identified. Okay, this assistant will be identified with this assistant ID. And we can also mention some instruction as well. Here, the instruction is nothing but it's the additional information that we want to provide for our large language model or this AI assistant that we have got. if you think about the architecture of working with the this large language model or this generative AI application, so it basically contains the prompt. Along with that, we can also provide the system instruction. So system instruction plus prompt is is the one that will be sent as an input for our maybe the generative AI model that I have got. So over here, the instruction means that what is the system instruction that I want to give for default whenever a user is sending any input. So here for the demonstration purpose, I'll make use of a very simple use case. Let's do one thing. Let me do one thing. Let me just pick up one of the web page. Okay, I'll use one of the web page that I've got right here. So it says one of the course page that I've got right here. Now what I'll do is I'm going to save this HTML file. Okay, so I'm going to say course dot HTML. That means I'm going to download the file that I have got with me over here. I'm going to download this HTML file in my local system. That's what I have done. So the idea is I want to build this chatbot, okay, this AI assistant. It should be able to answer the queries of the user related to this course page. Okay, so system instruction, I'm going to mention as you are an assistant who will answer the queries related to course of, let's say, MLOps, LLMOps. Okay, this is the system instruction that I'm going to give. And now this is an optional one. But if you provide this, you will have a better outcome when you are working with this generative AI model. Now, the reason this instruction plays an important role because when you think about the generative AI model, so these generative AI model has been trained on very large corpus of text data, which are general in nature. It is not domain specific. It has been trained on large corpus of text data. And we also call this model as a foundation model. Being a foundation model, it is able to perform all these tasks because of the ability of zero shot learning. That means it is able to answer and perform the task even though it has not been practically trained upon. So the more specific your instructions will be, the more better the responses from these large language models. And that's the importance of these large language models. Now, to give you the importance, like even when we think about implementing on our client projects as well, like whenever we are working and in my organization, when I think about creating creating these kind of chatbot for any of the application, the first thing that we are going to ask the business or the product owners is what exactly is the context in which the users would come when they are interacting with your AI application. So this is the first question that you need to think about when you are building any AI application. So you have to provide the context. The better the context, the better would be the performance of your model and the better would be the outcome of these generative AI models. Okay. Now that you have the background about the same, the next thing is we'll have to choose the model. Here for the demonstration, I'll make use of the model that is GPT-4 Turbo Preview. I'll keep the same. If I want, I can use the different models too. And in our application, we want the system to be able to load the data from the file, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to enable the tool of file search. I'll say enable file search. And from this, I can add the file. I'm going to say plus file. Now this is asking me to upload a file. So what I will do is I would go ahead and upload the file which I have just downloaded right now. Okay, that is course.html which I've downloaded earlier. I'm going to upload it right here. So I'm going to feed my HTML file over here in this OpenAI platform. I can also set some advanced option. So here we can specify the tokens and the chunk overlap. So these are all the hyperparameters. Okay. So I would recommend when you're creating your own generative AI application, use the default values. look at the performance, and then you can come back and change these hyperparameters. That is my recommendation, and that is how it has been giving the good results for me whenever we are building any applications. Okay, I'm going to attach the same, and over here we also have the option to select the vector store too. I can select the vector store if I have got any, and from there I can access the file. For now, we'll take up a simple file-based approach for this demonstration. So from here, you can, if you remember, I've talked about the vector database, right? So we can actually select the vector store from over here by specifying the vector store ID. Okay, you can check more at a later point. For now, I'll say attach. So this is going to create a file ID in the backend. See, this has created the file ID in the backend, and then it's going to upload the same. That means uh, it's going to upload the file. Now this file uh, uh, is will be used whenever we are asking any question, and the generation of the response will be based on this file. Now apart from that, there are additional functionalities as well, and this is a, I would say, an important one if you're building the real-time application. Normally more what happens is, uh, let me just give you the documentation. Here we have got something called as functions. Okay, so this is the function calling ability from this OpenAI API. So the function calling is an amazing ability that we have got, where we can connect these large language models to the external tools. So to give you an example, okay, let us assume that the user comes over here on your chatbot and he will say that, hey, go ahead and book me the flight tickets. Now the user will provide all the required information, and you would go ahead and capture all this information, and you will be able to interact with it and get the required information from the user. Now, in order to book or in order to do that certain activity, what you need to do is you need to call your enterprise function, isn't it? I mean, it can be a booking function, like an external function. Now that external function is the one that should be called with the inputs that you have received, and that is where this function calling would come into picture. Or in other cases, you might be interested in calling a different workflow itself. Now, this workflow, maybe you have set up some automation. There are various ways in which you can do the integration. There are the common tools called Pably. Okay, that's one tool that you have got, which would help you to perform the workflow trigger. Or there's one more tool that's called as Zapier. That's another website that we have got, where we can create our own automation. It can be marketing campaign, it can be customer support, or it can be team handoff, it can be anything. Okay, you can automate such workflow by calling a specific function, and that function will be calling the API of these third-party servers, and you can define these custom action. Like this, there are various products, and that's how you will do the integration. Now, if you're working in an enterprise environment, maybe you will call the Lambda function, which is running in the AWS, or it can be similar functions in the Google Cloud or Azure, which is going to trigger that function to do a specific activity. So for all such tasks, you can make use of this function calling ability in this OpenAI platform. In our case, I'm not going to use that. So if I want, I'll have to specify a function like this. Like, to give you an example, if I click on add function, it basically describes about like a name, get weather, and they have given some information. You can refer to the function calling API to get more details about the same. Okay, and the response format, we can control the format of the response. So we can mention whether it's a JSON object or not. In my case, I'm not going to mention anything. And we also have the hyperparameters, that is temperature and top P. So these are all the hyperparameters from any large language model standpoint. So temperature refers to the randomness, like it controls the randomness. So if you lower the value of temperature, okay, that means as the temperature reaches the zero, the model will become deterministic, and it might become repetitive too. So this is a hyperparameter. So play around with this in a careful manner, because you don't want to hamper the user experience. So you should not be like hallucinating. You should not be coming up with each and every time some random responses for the questions that is being asked by the end users. So just keep the default value, and do the thorough testing, and more importantly, track how the responses are being generated for the inputs that you're getting from the end users. Okay, and you can specify all these things. Now in my case, I think I'm good with creation, so I have already mentioned the file and everything, right? Now the best part is I can go ahead and understand whether it is working or not. Okay, that's the best part about this OpenAI platform. So I'm going to mention as when does the course is going to start. I'm just going to mention some question. This is specific to the website file that I've uploaded. So whenever I send any input, okay, so understand the flow that is happening. So the flow is first, it's going to be tracked via threads. So each and every interaction from an individual user, it will be actually like tracking as a thread. Okay, now when I send any other input, okay, so it will be under the same thread saying that the same user is asking the next question. Like for example, now if I ask as what is the course name, so it will be tracking under the same thread ID. That means the system will be able to track the context in which I'm asking the questions. Okay, so that's the best idea. That's the best part about this assistance API. Now, if you make use of this chat option, so it's like a one-to-one. You'll send one input and one response. That's not the common use case that I've seen in the industries. The common case of the industries, use case of the industries is will be specifying the file, and from that vector database or can be the file resource, you'll be generating the response. Okay, now you can clearly observe if I ask the question as when does the course is going to start, I haven't given anything. Okay, I just mentioned when does the course is going to start. It went through this HTML file, and from this HTML file it understood that okay, the class is maybe starting on 24th of June, and that is what is giving me the response right here. It says course is going to start from 24th of June. And if I ask for the question, it says course name is MLOps, LLMOps. That's what it says right here. Maybe that is what it has understood from this HTML file. Now let me ask a few more things. Okay, so what does it cover? So if I ask this question as what does it cover? So it mentions what are the key things that will be covered in maybe in that particular course. So it is able to process this entire file. Maybe it is going through this section as well. And then it is able to answer the questions that I'm placing it over here. Now, let me share you the main difference. Okay, I'm asking for this assistant, it is able to answer the question. Now, if I ask the same thing to my chat GPT, okay, if I say, when does the course start? The chat GPT cannot answer. Okay, it says the course starts on 5th of July. Okay, I'll say, which course are you referring to? Because this is an interesting one, because that's not the one, the file that we are taking, like that I'm referring to. Okay, it says, I apologize for the confusion. I don't have specific information about a particular course you are referring to. So that means like something like when I asked this question, maybe the chat GPT responded something else. And now it says that it like somehow it says that, okay, I could not answer it. Now that's a strange thing. Now let me ask in a more with the context way. I'm going to say, when does the course is going to start? Now, even if I mention this detail, okay, so the thing is, it says that it is set to start on June 10. Okay, this offers comprehensive learning experience. Bootcamp covers many things. You can also check the course page on the platform such as Udemy. Okay, so what it did is, okay, it's a maybe it went through the Google search and it has generated the response. So it is referring to the Udemy page where we have another course on MLOps. That's what it is referring to. Okay, but it is answering the question correctly by referring to this site. Okay, but it is also referring to the other sites as well. So the key idea is, okay, if you think about the general chat GPT, okay, if you think about the general chat GPT, it is not able to answer efficiently, just like I've seen with the assistant. The model that you see right here, this is a general model which can look into the website. Maybe that is what we have seen. It can look into the web and answer, or it can look into its existing information and answer, but it cannot access the file that I have shared. Now, in the business standpoint, you'll not be using your public resource. You have your private data set and you want to build the application on top of it. And that is how you will be generating and building such assistants, guys. Okay, that's the core idea about creating and building the assistant. So, what we have done, we have built an assistant, and this assistant can answer the questions from the information that we have got in this course page, and it is able to generate the response. So we have built the assistant itself. Now let's use this assistant and let's create an application. So in order to do that, so let me launch a Visual Studio Code. So before I do that, guys, okay, let me just give you the idea about how we can go ahead and work with this OpenAI API and generate some dummy response. From there, we'll use the same code in our application too. Okay. So to start with, we'll have to perform the installation. I'll say pip install OpenAI. So this will install the OpenAI in my local system, that is in that environment. And I'm going to select the assistants. So here it says, in order to work with this OpenAI assistant, so first I'll have to do the installation, pip install OpenAI. So this is performing the installation. Now, once the installation is completed, I can then go ahead and work with the same. Like for example, I can start by importing the like from OpenAI, import OpenAI. Okay. Now here, when I'm calling this OpenAI, we'll have to specify the API key. Okay. That is not mentioned. We'll have to specify the API key. I'm going to say API underscore key is equal to, I'll generate an API key and I'll specify it right here. Okay. So in order to generate the same, I'll go to this API key. I'll say create new secret key. I'm going to say demo. Okay, the project, I'll keep it as default project. And I would mention as create a secret key. So this is going to create an OpenAI secret key. I'll copy the same and I'm going to use it in my application. Okay, ensure you, whenever you're doing it, once your hands-on is completed, just do the expiration. That's all. Okay, so once this is done, so this is going to create a client object. Now using this client object, we'll be able to connect to our assistant. Now, in our case, the assistant that we have created, let me come to the assistants. The assistant that I had created was this. Like you can also get the assistants by clicking on the separate section right here that's called as the assistant. You can see the various assistants that you have created in your OpenAI account. So this is the open assistant that I've created. So we can use this assistant, this ID, and use it in our code. So the way that I can load this assistant is, okay, let me just show you with an example. Okay, just one thing, guys. Okay, so whenever we are working, so the first thing that we are going to do is in order to work with our OpenAI assistant. So let me do one thing. I'll say my assistant ID. Let me just save it, and we'll be using it in our code. Assistant ID, and I'm going to specify my assistant ID. This is my assistant ID, and I'll be using it in my code. So first thing that we have to do in order to work with our assistant is we will have to create a thread. Okay, we don't have to create an assistant over here. This is the coding way of creating. Since we have already created from our hands-on earlier, I can go ahead and create a thread like this. So this is going to create a thread. Okay, now once a thread has been created, okay, the next thing that I can do is for this thread, I can add in the messages. Okay, for this thread, I can add in the messages, and I can go ahead and specify my prompt and the messages. To give you an example, I'll mention my prompt. I'll mention the prompt as when does the course is going to start. Okay, that's the question that I want to ask. And this is my prompt. Now, the way that I'm going to work is I'll say client dot, yeah, this is the one. Client dot beta dot messages dot create. We'll have to specify assistant ID and specify our assistant ID, thread ID, and we'll specify our uh, thread ID that has been created over here on top. Okay. Now, apart from that, we'll also have to mention our input. Here, my input is basically the text which I'm sending, like my text as prompt. So this is my input that I'm sending it right here. So this is how we can specify the same. Let's just validate it. Okay. So the code that has been given, it's basically the code uh, I've got by default. And whenever we are creating the run, okay, so we can have with streaming and without streaming. So to add the messages, it's basically content is equal to, let me just mention it in that way. Content is equal to prompt. Okay, this is how I will be specifying the code right here. Okay, so I'm going to mention the message, and we can also mention one more thing. We can also say role, and I'll specify the role as the end user. So this is going to create the role. Okay, client dot beta dot threads. Okay, so this is going to create a message. Let's see. Uh, okay, so I don't okay, so there were a few errors. Okay, so what we have to do is to add a message to a thread, I just have to say thread ID is thread.id and specify the content. Okay, that's all. So that's how we can add a message through a thread. So this is going to create a thread ID and add a message through our thread. Now, once that is done, we'll have to create a run. In order to create a run, I can just copy this code right here. This is going to create a run object which says that client.beta.threads.run, and we can say create and poll, or I can go ahead and simply say uh, create. That is going to work as well. And we just have to mention our thread ID and the assistant ID. For the assistant ID, I'll say assistant underscore ID that we have got created. And we can also specify any other instruction that we want to provide. In my case, I don't want to provide any instruction because I have already provided the system instruction in the earlier section. So this is going to create a run. Okay, let me do one thing. Instead of saying it as create and poll, I would simply say create. That will be much better. Okay, let's keep it this only. Okay, now whenever we create any run, okay, this run is going to reach our OpenAI platform too. If I click on threads, okay, if I click on threads right here, we'll be able to see the threads that has been created and the messages that we have received in each thread. So here it says that this is a thread, I believe, which has been which we have sent. It says that when does the user is going to start. Okay. Uh, it looks like okay. Uh, there seems to be an issue in the API might have generated. Let's check. Okay, rate limit reached. Okay. And then it says that the ML ops is scheduled to start on 24th of June. That means we have some response. Like what it says is this is the input that I have provided, which is basically the prompt. And for this prompt, we have the output that we have generated from this model. Okay, so that means for the information that I provided, the run that I have created, it has been successful. Now, once the run has been successful, we can go ahead and return the text. Like to do the same, I'm going to mention a while loop. I'm going to mention the while loop in this manner. I'll say while true, and here what it says is, okay, so now let me just display the text. So if I display the text, okay, what it says is we have got the response. So let me just describe what has happened. Okay, so okay, so I have some questions as well. Let me just answer it. First, let's take a look into it as what is happening. So what we have done is we have created the assistant ID, and then for this assistant that we have created, we are sending in the prompt. And for this prompt, okay, for this prompt, we are going to add this message to our thread. Then we are going to call this run method, which is nothing but the create and poll. And once this is done, we'll have to check whether we have received the response. In order to check the same, so I have mentioned, I have created a while loop which says as while true, and it will keep on executing it. It will check whether for this particular thread and for the given run ID, whether it has been completed or not. If it is completed, I'm going to fetch the messages, okay, and I'm going to get the latest message. And whatever the latest message, I'm storing it inside a variable called text, and this is the output of this variable text. Okay, that's how we are seeing. And from this code, I'm able to generate the response from this generative AI application. Okay, now I see a question from Blissy. The Blissy says that here in the code, we did not pass the HTML file. So how does it read the content? Now that's a good question, Blissy. So if you remember, when we think how, when we have built this assistant API, we have built this assistant API through our playground. So from the playground, we had already uploaded the file. Now what we are doing is we are not creating any assistant in this code. We are just using the already created assistant. And for that assistant, we are sending the prompt and generating the response. That is what is being done right here. Okay, so that's the basic idea of what is being done. All right. So what we have seen so far is we have seen as how we can build our own generative AI application, and we have looked into the code as how to call that built assistant API and generate the response. So that is what we have seen so far. Okay, now that this is clear, now let's see as how does our code would look like if we think about building such application from scratch. So for the demonstration, let me just show you the same. I have a code already prepared and I'll show you the demos. I'll share you some of the key things that you have to remember and the key setup that you have to do in order to implement it and ensure that it would work. Okay, so let me just validate it once. So what I have done is there's already a folder that is with in my local system. Let me show you the contents of that file and that will give you a perspective as how we can actually build it. So it's the Gen AI from scratch. Okay. So this is what I've got with me. All right. So what I'm going to do is here, this is a file that has, this is the folder structure that has got all the necessary code with me in order to do the complete deployment of this generative AI application from scratch. It has got the code which is going to take care of deploying this overall, like creating a fast API application. Then we have also written the YAML file to create it as a Kubernetes cluster. So to make it simple, I've already created everything. There's a Docker file, which is going to build the Docker image. And there is also the GitHub Actions file, which will do all the required activities and deploy it on the Google Kubernetes engine. Okay, so let's note down the important ones. So first thing over here is the configuration file. Now inside this configuration file, there's uh, there is something which says as assistant ID. Now this is where you have to specify your assistant ID. In my case, the assistant ID is the one that I have created earlier. This is my assistant ID. Okay, you just have to replace your assistant ID with your assistant ID that you have got. Okay, and the another thing is, okay, this is the assistant ID. Now this assistant ID will be used in this main.py file. In this main.py file, so I have written the code in Python programming language where I'm going to read this, uh, where I'm going to read this, the assistant ID. Okay, so I'm reading this assistant ID from this configuration file. And along with that, since this is a production grade deployment, so we are going to deploy it inside the Kubernetes cluster. And in order to deploy it inside the Kubernetes cluster, we'll be pushing it as an environment variable, whatever the API key that I've got. And that will be inside the Kubernetes secret. And we are going to load it from the environment variable. Then coming over here, we have a fast API object created. And this fast API object, where we have a function which is created that's called as a response. Now, if you take a look into the code of this response method, okay, so what it says is here, the prompt says as body.text, and we have created a thread ID. And for this thread ID, we are specifying the message just like the code that we have created. And we are going to add that message to our thread. And then we are going to send, we are going to check, okay, we are going to check whether the run has been completed. If the run is completed, we are going to generate the response. So that's it. It's a very simple fast API application that has been created, which will get the input from the user, and it would go ahead and generate the response. Okay, that's a simple fast API application that has been created. Now, once this has been created, the important thing that we generally do is when we think about deployment, we have to create a Docker file. If you think about it, its creation of Docker file is very straightforward. We'll copy all the files and we'll install the required libraries inside this requirements.txt. I've mentioned OpenAI, Fast API, and UVCon. So Fast API and UVCon is essential for running this Fast API application. That's all. So this will take care of the installation. And then we are going to run this main.py, and this is going to start this fast API application on the port 80. Then this Dockerized application, we are going to use it for our Kubernetes cluster. So what we are going to do is inside this deploy.yaml file, I've created this deploy.yaml file as a deployment. That is my Kubernetes deployment object. Over here, I've mentioned the details about what exactly is the deployment name and how many replicas that I want to run. And this is followed by some details about how exactly that I have to run. Now, in this scenario, since the deployment talks about deploying on the Google Kubernetes cluster, so I have mentioned the project ID and image ID, and this will be changed whenever we apply the GitHub action. Okay, we'll also specify the values from the OpenAI secret, like we are going to create it as an environment variable. Remember, I've mentioned that we'll pick up the OpenAI API from this environment variable, right? So it is being picked from here. Now, if you take a look into this final, that is GitHub actions.yaml file, Here, we are going to make use of the GitHub action secrets, where we will populate the GitHub like GKE project, that is your Google Kubernetes Engine project ID, your Google Kubernetes cluster that you would create, the deployment name, and the steps that you will do in order to take care of the complete steps, okay, in order to take care of complete steps of this deployment. So where we will just go ahead, and if you take a look at it, what for every change that would happen in our code environment, we'll perform the build. We are going to tag it. And once it is tagged, we are going to push it to the Google Container Registry. Then we are going to, on the fly, change this deploy.yaml file using this customize. And we are going to create our OpenAI secret, whatever the OpenAI secret that we have got. We are going to create it as an environment, like we are going to create it as a Kubernetes secret so that we can consume it. Okay. And then we are going to deploy it on our Google Kubernetes cluster. Okay. That's a high level way of how your code would look like. I'll do one thing. I'm going to attach this complete code. Okay. I'm going to attach you the complete code in our in a place where you can access it. Give me a second. I also see some questions as well. Let me attach the code over here and then I'll take up the questions, Steve. So I'm going to create it as a, okay, not this one. So I'll specify today's date, 9 June, create Gen AI application from scratch. And over here, I'm going to upload the file. So you can access the code from the Manifold AI Learning website under the Manifold AI Learning workshop. So I'm going to share you the link right here in the chat window. Just if you are unable to receive the link, just go to manifoldailearning.in, go to the courses, and you'll be able to access it. So if you come over here in the page at the end, okay, you'll be able to see the today's content too. Okay, that's how you can access the source code. Okay, now there are some questions right here. One question that I see here is from Satyabrata, says that error code 404, no assistant found with ID. Okay, so that's a strange one, Satyabrata. Can you just check, okay, whether this assistant ID has been created and you are able to interact it once? Just check once, because that's a common issue that I've seen people would get. And also ensure that that particular assistant ID is visible under your threads. And there can be one more error, which could be the extra characters, like one extra before or after. That might also be a problem. That's a common issue that I've seen when we are doing the implementation too. Okay, that's one thing. Just check that once. Okay. So you have already deployed in the assistant, then that would mean that maybe you can do one thing. I'll share this. I'll do one thing. Let me just upload this code as well. Maybe just recheck once. Okay. So I'll also attach this code too for everyone's reference. So just check once if you're able to access it. I mean, that should be a quick fix, I would think, Satyabrata. Okay. And another question that I see here is, what respective changes do we have to do to deploy the same app in AWS? That's a good question. So the best way, okay, whenever you are thinking about building such automatic actions is, so I'll share you an easier way, which is really helpful for us. Maybe I'll go to the repository. Like whenever you upload anything to a repository, go to the actions, okay? And over here, you can click on new workflow. And let's say you want to deploy it in the AWS. So in such scenarios, you'll say Amazon, what is it? AWS, Kubernetes, EKS, okay? Like let's say start with EKS. So we are deployed to EKS. So EKS. So I think there will be various ones that are available. We have one ECS, EKS. Okay, maybe the one we do not have it. Let's check. Okay. So I found a blog around the same. They have given some information. They have just described how to specify everything. So yeah, I think they have given some example to. Let's check. This is deployment. Okay. All right. So if we think about GitHub Actions in the AWS code build, so this is how it should be. And let's check. This is about the build specification for the deploy stage. So I mean, I can say that this website has given the complete information as how should be our application files would look like. Since I think they have made use of uh, at least at a very high level. I haven't gone through it, but at a very high level, it looks like they're using the build tool instead of GitHub Action. They're using the build tool of AWS code build. At least that is what I can see from here. But yeah, you can just check this once, guide once, Satyabrata. This should help you. All right, guys. Any other questions, team? And thank you so much, guys, for asking some of the amazing questions. Okay. So, folks, and thank you so much again, guys, for asking some of the amazing questions. I hope you have now understood how you can build your own AI application from scratch. So, if you're interested in building such application, I mean, there's a live course which I've got an opportunity. This is a second batch that we are conducting, second iteration of our ML Ops, LLM Ops, AI Ops bootcamp. So do check out the course page from Manifold AI Learning. I'm sharing you the link over here in the page. So this is a live session where we'll be performing 3 projects, one on DevOps at a very high level, and the other one is about the ML ops. The third one is about the AI ops. So that would help you to master your ML ops, AI ops journey in a live interactive session, just like the one that you have joined today. So if you're someone who is interested to learn and ensure that you are going to master it. So I highly recommend you to check out this live session from Manifold AI Learning. I'll be your instructor in that session. The session timings are 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. IST on weekdays. The total duration is 32 hours and it is starting on 24th of June 2024. It will be a live session. And the best part is once you have enrolled into this program, so all the learners from the same batch, you will be in the respective WhatsApp, you'll be in the same WhatsApp group. Even I'll be there as an instructor to provide you the support wherever required in your overall learning journey. So that's a special thing about this live session. This is a second iteration. We have got, and like us, like we recently completed the first batch. It was an immensely successful and we received a lot of feedback, and all those feedbacks have been incorporated in the second iteration. So I'm excited to see you guys in that live session. So do check out the page for more information. If you have got any other questions, on any of the topics that we have discussed today, please feel free to let me know. Okay. So thank you again, guys. So I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you, Rakshit. Oh, that's great. Okay. Sure, Blessy. I think you can reach out to the Edureka, you can reach out to the Manifold AI Learning team. They can definitely assist with the same. I think there's already an offer going on, but you can definitely reach out to them. I'll put in a word with them. You'll receive an email. Okay. Thank you, Blessy. Okay. Sure. Yeah. I look forward to seeing you, Akshay. Okay. Akshay says is already enrolled. Okay. Yeah, I look forward to seeing you, Akshay. Okay. Thank you, Blessy. Okay. Thank you, Darshan. Thank you, Samyak. Thank you, Manjula. Okay, thank you so much again, everyone, for joining in and taking your time. And I hope to see you on our upcoming live sessions too. So I'll see you next time. And till then, subscribe to Manifold Air Learning YouTube channel and check out their course page for more learning. I'll see you next time, everyone.